Hi and welcome back to SGTV. This is another video in the Job Routes for Electricians mini-series. So as usual, we'll be talking to electricians about the various routes you can take as an electrician. So once you become qualified, you don't necessarily have to just stick with one route, or even if you've been doing a certain job for X amount of years and you want to progress or change in the industry, this is what we'll be talking about in the mini-series. And today we're going to be talking with Eddie from Pegasus Electrical, who is a HVAC installer, which means heating, ventilation and aircon for those who don't know. So Eddie, thank you for joining us today.
Hi Ben, you alright?
Yeah, good. It's nice to have a fellow Midlander.
That's it, they probably won't understand us now, will
No.
they?
When I do these videos, I try and put on quite a neutral accent, and then if I get a fellow Midlander on the show, I'm going to start going a bit brummy and, you know, all that. So sorry to our audience.
Subtitles will be available.
Yeah. So could you tell us a bit about sort of how you started out in the industry and sort of how you got to where you are now?
Well, it's 35 years of that, so that could be a bit of a long story, so I'll cut it short. Basically, did a work experience at school, which was at a BBC pebble mill on the electrical and mechanical side. The building's no longer there, I believe, but did that. That was really interesting. And then to join that, I did get offered a job, but you had to be 18 and you had to be in the union, both at the same time. And then it was the girlfriend I was with at the time, old man, was the director at electrical contractors firm, and basically I went and did another work experience in my own time then, and basically got offered a job, so I took it and went through my apprenticeship, and it was an apprenticeship rather than different other ways of doing it, which was it was really good. Loads of experience in different things, throughout domestic, commercial, industrial. You know, I mean, you could be in a granny's house, like, you know, winding up a doorbell one day, and the next day you'd be pulling 240 mil armoured in, or whatever it be, like, you know, in a factory. So yeah, it was very varied. So it was quite good. Did enjoy it. Stayed there. I was there for up until end of 2000. It had been about 16 years, something like that. I was longest serving at the time, other than the gaffer, and when worked for myself, and then that was it. But
Never looked back.
No, it's. I mean, the one thing I will say is, I mean, I made plenty of mistakes. The biggest ones was financial. Working for yourself, it really is a case of, like, you know, you really got to treat it as a business and understand how a business works, financially especially. I mean, it doesn't matter what job you do, whatever trade you're in, that is absolutely critical. You know, whereas obviously, you know, hands-on bloke who did, you know, you could throw in as many cables as you like, and lights and sockets and pumps or whatever it be, but unless you financially sort it out correctly, God, that really comes a real big bind.
Yeah, big learning curve.
It's a massive learning curve. Yeah. So that is the one thing I would suggest to anybody who's ever looking to work for themselves, is make sure you've got a good accountant and you understand how a business works. You know, I learned it the hard way. You know, so it was that was a big setback. It probably put me back about 10 years.
Really?
Seriously, yeah. So it's you know, you be slugging your guts out, like, and you know, it's but until you end up in, you know, loads of debt and all sorts, like, you know, it's you realise you're in a right sticky situation. How do you get out of it? So, you know, it's the biggest advice I'll ever give to anybody when working for yourself. Doesn't matter how good of an electrician or chippy or bricky or whatever you do, don't matter how good you are, unless your books are right, it means absolutely sweet nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's so it's that's a downer to start on, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that's the beauty about this channel. We're not trying to make everything sunshine and rainbows. We're trying to help people, no matter what stage they are in the industry, what level. We're trying to make it as honest and helpful as we possibly can, you know, for better or worse. And that's what we do. That's why we do this channel.
Yeah.
So what made you go into heating, ventilation, all that kind of thing?
That was dropped on me, basically. My old firm that I used to work for, the governor gave me this job to do. The schematic drawings for the panel was about 1 inch thick. The panel was being built for us, but I had to go and wire the panel, take the panel fitted. Well, the panel was delivered. It was about 6 foot by about 8 foot, 6 foot high by about 8 foot wide. Hundreds of connections in it, so that arrived on site, and basically, you can sort that out, it's probably one of the biggest boiler rooms I've ever done. So, you could fit you could easily fit a hockey pitch into the boiler room itself. Wow. It was that big. The air handling units were like the size of flats.
Yeah.
And there was 4 of them, and it was that was a big learning curve. But then it's a case of just breaking it down. I've got to be interested on that particular drawing, what was on the right hand side, what was going out. But over the time of going through the drawing and such like, and getting used to bits and pieces like differential pressure switches, pumps, heat exchange plates, sensors, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, you start to learn how it all starts coming about, and that was it really. And another job I did was a linishing machine for British Guide Rails. It was. I don't think they're over here anymore. They basically make guide rails for lift shafts, and there's companies throughout the world who are part of the same company. And when I wired this up in this big factory over at West Brom, and that was all control stuff. And put control panel up, all conduit and what have you down. I mean, it must have been about 60 foot long. This was so about 20 meters long.
Yeah,
this linishing machine. So it was.
Must have took your interest though.
Oh yeah. But that sort of thing did. Putting lights up and putting sockets in bores the tears out of me. Actually, bores the tears out of me. It really does. I mean, nowadays, if I was into it now, I don't suppose it would so much because of obviously you've got now the new technologies and such like new types of lighting, and it is a lot more interesting now than what it ever was. Because I mean, it was a filament bayonet cap, and it was about your lot, or a 2D fitting, like all the old.
So where would the line be drawn between what you do and, let's say, a gas engineer? I know they're obviously going to be doing gas piping and all that, but when it comes to like the heating system, so where do you draw the line there?
We make it work, basically. That's the crux of it. Is they basically install the boilers, the pumps, pipe work, pressurization units, all that sort of stuff. And then we go in, wire it all up, and make it work. It's the crux of it, really. It's.
And is that just domestic, or are you talking big commercial, industrial heating systems?
Oh, all sorts. I've, like I say, the one plant room I've done, like it was huge. Like you could fit an hockey pitch in it. Like its exchange plate was tall as what I am. 6 foot. Like that was each exchange plate. They're normally in a domestic boiler. Like they're like about about 200 mil, 8 inches. Like so it's. But yeah, it was domestic. I learned how the pipe work. Basically worked in domestic because the typical thing going back when I was younger, like was the plumber would go into an house, don't matter how big it was, and you'd get dumped with like the 3-port valves, mixing valves, 2-port valves. You get a box of all these bits, time clocks and stats and such like. And you were just giving it, like, none of the makes married up or anything, like, you have Honeywell this and Satchwell that, and, it's all basic stuff in the daylight, but, of course, it's understanding how the pipe works, basically. Once you get that round your head, like, it doesn't matter how big the system gets, it's a case of breaking everything down, to suit the way you think, and I've got quite a logical mind. He does see how things work. I like mechanical, throw me in an engine, I'll strip it down and rebuild it. I enjoy that side of things as well. So
do you think there's
it is.
Sorry, do you think there's more of a future in what you're doing now than there was previously? Because before it was very, like you say, let's say domestic install, for example, you'd have gas fitters that do your boiler, you'd have an electrician should wire it up. I say should because some of the gas fitters will do it themselves, which I'm sure a lot of people know of. But now, there's a lot of new tech coming on the market, like these ground pumps, heat pumps, what they're called, the immersion heaters. They seem to be sort of making a bit of a comeback for a short period, and amongst other tech. And it's gearing more towards
connected to the solar and everything.
It's gearing more towards
massive.
An electrician than a plumber or a gas fitter. So do you think that's the way it's going?
Oh, technology now. I mean, to be an apprentice now, with how the technology is moving, I mean, this is the fastest moving trade without question. Hands down, a boiler's a boiler. The technology in it does change slightly, but at the end of the day, it's still the same 5 pipes that go into it. It's, and flue that comes out of it, and it's a bit of a flame, and that's it, job done. I mean, basically, obviously there's a load of regs that get nailed to it, but, that's the crux of it. But our technology, I mean, like now with your solar charging your cars before it sends it into the grid, and all this technology, your new lighting systems, heating systems, in domestic, commercial, and industrial. Across the absolute board. It is the fastest moving trade without question. The technologies are moving. It's getting a lot more internet based, so you need to be a bit more savvy with that. Trying to learn how to do that, like going back when I like programming HMI screens, like touch screens, like on front of the control panel, and all that. I mean, that was massive hard learning, and the software wasn't really built for a novice or anything. Whereas now, I mean, it's drag and drop, put it in there, sign that to that address, and that's it. It's a damn sight more simpler than what it ever used to be. Even the programming side on PLCs, it really is. It's basically wiring inside of a computer screen, but people do frighten from it. But it isn't. It's wiring at your desk. You've got inputs and outputs and all that, and pull your blocks in, wire it up, and that's it. You're up and firing.
Do you get involved much with some of the new stuff, like the ground source heat pumps, air heat pumps, all that kind of thing?
No, I have touched on it. The client that we're with at the moment, they have not gone into that side of things at the moment. But it's something I do keep an interest in, and keep an eye out on. So it's
out of curiosity, which do you think will be the heating tech of choice in, say, 20 years? Because not talking of burning, not talking boilers where we've got gas boilers, hydrogen boilers, all this kind of thing. I'm more talking about electrical heat pumps. What do you think would be the preferred method that will stand out?
I think a mix, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I really do, yeah. It's and them all talking together. Because let's face it, you couldn't just heat a building off heat source pump. You just wouldn't get enough heat. Especially if you've got things like fan convectors involved. Basically, it's like a radiator with a fan which blows the air through. You just wouldn't have the kilowatts to be able to do that. It'd just come out as cold air. So then you would need, they are dropping gas, so it will be like hydrogen or something like that. There'll be more involved. There's new gas technologies coming through. So it'll be a mix of them all, and it's basically getting them all talked talk to each other to get the biggest efficiency out of them, and that's where I think it'll go.
Yeah, and that's why there's
You
going to
know.
be such a demand, I think, for
Oh,
electricians to be
front
going
yeah,
into your field, into HVAC.
yeah, it will be. It's well, people do think it's a complicated. They look at a control panel. I mean, I wire them out my head. I do the drawings afterwards. That's the way my mind works. You see, so I'm looking at it from a practical point of view. They look at them, they go, "Oh, what's going on here?" Like, all these lamp switches and this, that, and the other, and contactors, relays, PLCs. Well, all it is at the end of the day is a feed, a switch, and a load.
Yeah.
If you look at it in that context and break it down in that context, it is actually so much simpler.
Yeah.
Okay,
The tech itself isn't exactly new. They've improved all these things and made it compact and more efficient. But like you say, it's essentially quite simple technology that they're just sort of, reinventing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just a lot of stuff in one box, basically. That's where that's what throws people. Now, if you spread that out across the wall, then people would get it a lot easier, I think. But it's because it's like, suddenly, like, you've got all this, like, but it ain't the case, break it down.
Yeah.
It's, that's how I see it anyway.
Let's talk about qualifications, because again, this is one of the messages we try and get across is once you've got your qualifications from whichever route you're doing, apprentice, courses, college, anything like that. Are there any specific qualifications you need to go into HVAC?
Well, if you're staying on the control side of it, depending on what you're doing, of course. I mean, if you're doing if you're going to panel building, I mean, you can go into that as an electrician. There is some more learning that you would need to do for that, because obviously there is different calculations involved, very similar to our own, like, in trunking capacities and such like. You've got split trunking. You've still got your cables, which normally carry higher currents anyway, the tri-rated cables, and you've still got all your spacing factors, and all that sort of stuff. Plus, also you've got your heat dissipation from your contactors, your transformers, PLCs, and all that. And there's heat calculations involved in that. But basically, it's pretty much as really. It's easier to go into the panel building side and from an electrician's point of view than it is for a panel builder to go into an electrician's job, like, because basically all you do is scaling it down into a box, as it were. And then obviously, like, the wiring that comes out of that is an electrician's job. It's so literally.
So do you think you get more? If you've just got qualified, you're fresh out of college, or however you've done it. Do you think more people are going sort of down a domestic commercial route and then splitting off into HVAC rather than going straight into HVAC?
It depends on the firm you're working for, really. I think because obviously, like for myself, I don't touch domestic work. Never really enjoyed it, to be honest with you. I didn't mind doing empty rewires and such like, because you can just crack on with it. But like doing, like, where people are living in the house or flat or whatever it be, I just found it such a bind. I did, it was. And of course, when Part P come out, that was my way. I can say, nah, I'll pass it on to a couple of the firms that I know do it, like, and then I'll get work from them, for, when it gets a bit more complex. Even if it is a heating system in the domestic house, it's the only things I really touch if and when it does come up. It's not that often. But yeah, I'll stick to that side of it, really. So, it's...
What about when it comes to some of the larger things like the big duct work, larger fans, that kind of thing? Again, are we talking extra qualifications, or is it more of a hands-on experience kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't actually fit I don't fit the pilot work and duct work and that sort of stuff. Like, it's they're always put in place. You've got your duct fitters and what have you. You've got your pipe fitters. gas engineers and such like. So they normally nail it all together, and then we come in after and then wire all the pieces up. So I mean, it is just wiring from A to B. You know, you've got a fan that's being controlled from a control panel to get that supply from A to B. Normally speaking, on the bigger jobs, there'd be consultants involved. They'd already have all the cable sizes sorted out, and literally you're just pulling in cables and connecting cables, and then you'd normally get, once you've finished doing your part, going from control panel to the sensors or differential pressure switches or airflow switches, you know, the boilers, whatever it be. You know, the commissioning engineer then takes over and makes it work basically. So checks that everything's going in the right direction, like with your 3-phase and such like. You know, some of the big motors I've worked on, like, you know, if you did send them the wrong way, it would do a hell of a lot of damage. So it was, you know, it's very important that it was checked out first, you know, especially when you're talking like thousands of pounds, like just for the motor, you know, and mind all the other kit, like, you know, it was quite a, you know, so, you know, you get them guys in and they do that side of it. I mean, with the stuff I do normally now, I design it, because they're smaller boiler rooms. You've probably got between, normally speaking, between 2 and 6, maybe 7 zones, individually pumped or electrically zoned, where a pump could go around 2 zones, but then it'll have fan convectors, and you switch to fan convectors, which then will turn it into another 2 zones. So they are on smaller scales. I mean, my panels are normally between 1,000i be 800 or 1,000 be 600, pretty much standard. And you know, the way I've got it set out now, that it is pretty much a repeat, and you know, you either add or drop a pump or whatever it be for that, like, you know, just slightly modify it so it comes fairly quick, like, you know, building a panel. I can knock a panel out in 3 to 4 days quite happily. You know, it's you know, when I'm left to it, no phone calls. You know.
Yeah, when you're left to it, there's always phone calls, though, isn't there?
That is the other problem with being self-employed, is everybody thinks you work for yourself, or you don't. That is an absolute fallacy. That is, you do not work for yourself. When you work for a company, you've normally got either your contracts manager or your gaffer or wherever it be who controls you. You have one person to deal with. When you work for yourself, if you've got 20 customers, you've got 20 gaffers.
Yeah, all with their own needs, responsibilities, and expectations.
Precisely, yeah. So yeah, it is a bit of a fallacy that it's working for yourself. It's pick and choose what you want to do, because it don't always work. So,
what would you say I mean, you've mentioned a few challenges already, you know, like expensive components that if they go wrong, it could potentially come in out of your pocket, multiple gaffers to work for. But what would you say some of the biggest challenges you have to come across in HVAC work?
Biggest challenges, probably the paperwork.
Really?
It's my biggest that's my biggest challenge. You know, because I do design, like, you know, it's like altering the drawings, like CAD up the drawings and stuff like that. You've got your PLC programming. I mean, with the jobs that we're doing at the moment, they're all very similar. So it is a lot quicker. But if you're starting from scratch, you could be spending longer doing the design and the drawings than it'd take you to build the panel. You know, and of course you've got to allow for that, you know, which then basically nearly doubled the price of your panel, because the labour intensity is involved. I mean, that's your biggest price in anything, really. A lot of the time is your labour, isn't it? So, you know, the parts generally, unless you're doing big scale, you know, it's generally speaking up to, like, you know, commercial, even in like your shops or even your bigger shops. You know, it's not major money. It's obviously, you've got to make sure all your insurances are in place and this, that, and the other. Fortunately, I've never had to use it, so
yeah,
I see the problems before they eat normally. whether it be somebody else's design or whatever it be.
I suppose that just comes with experience, though, doesn't it?
That does, yeah, it does come with experience. I mean, if it was a sort of route you wanted to get into, it's a case of working with the right companies. Work for an electrical contractor who works with like a control panel company to start off with. Get used to the kit. I mean, we worked for quite a few panel companies once I'd started getting into that. Back in the old days, we was doing control panels for probably fitting them and wiring from them. Probably it was about 6 different panel companies. So, of course, then you've got the experience of then how different companies build them as well, you say. That's where I've got the advantage. Like, when I build mine, like I've taken like what I consider the best ideas from each of them, and I get a better product at the end of it, so it's but that comes with the experience.
Yeah.
If you're coming through the electrical route into the HVAC route, then try and get on with the firms, them type of firms.
Learn from them.
Yeah. Get used to it. See if it is, your cookie.
Yeah, but like you say, it's enjoyable for people like yourself who probably enjoy the practical aspect of figuring something out, stripping it apart in their head and getting an understanding of how it works and simplifying it and not being overwhelmed by that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite fortunate like that where I mean, I've been told I was slightly dyslexic or CRPD issue or whatever it be, I don't particularly care really, to be honest. But my brain works in a very logical manner, so that does help, if you're a logical thinker.
I think a lot of Sparkies do though, don't they?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, if you can understand one-way, two-way, intermediate switching, how a contactor operates, basically you're halfway there.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to the PLC programming, you're halfway there. It's it is literally like you got your inputs and outputs and what you want it to do in between. You can make that as complicated as you like, or as simple as you like. Just switches in and lights out.
What's the most enjoyable aspects you have from the job?
The end of it.
The end of it.
Yeah. Well, it's the finished product.
Oh, okay.
And the finished product, then on to the next one. I move around the country a lot. Some people will find it a bind. Been doing it for a good number of years now, so for probably the best part of 25 years, doing a lot of like moving up and down the country, which is one of the biggest advantages of living where we do in the Midlands. Got an easy network to jump onto, and that's it. A couple of hours, you're pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
It's the breakdown side on the servicing side, that can become a bit of a pain. Like the other week, it was a phone call. You pop up to Falkirk. It's only 4.5 hours up the road, 5 hours up the road. Get up there. I'm there 10 minutes. It takes me longer to open up the gates, get in there, open up the building. See pretty much straight away because I know what I'm looking for. I've been told what the basic problem is, and it's normally only going to be because of the experience. It's normally, and this is a panel which has got no wiring, no drawings or anything like. It's a fairly basic panel, but even so, it's because nothing's starting up or anything. It's more than likely going to be either the feed-in, but the panel light's on, so it's more than likely going to be the emergency circuit or the control circuit that's gone down. So, it's fairly quite straightforward then to, don't look at things too deeply, start from the fault finding, start from the beginning. Have you got a feed coming in? Right, move on to the next bit there. Your fuse is okay or MCB switched on or, have you got power coming out of them? It could be a faulty MCB. Check both sides of it,
Process of elimination.
Start from the easy stuff. 90% of the time it's going to be somewhat easy. Fault finding normally is. But if you look at it, because it looks a complicated system, you try and look at it complicated, you get too much into it, you could be there for days, and it could be a 20-minute job. You know, it's because you're totally gone off on because it looks complicated, you think it's going to be a complicated problem. As normally speaking, it isn't. You know, it's start at the beginning. Always start at the beginning. Check seconds.
I mean, this was going to be my next question. Really, was what sort of advice would you give? I mean, what advice would you give to anyone sort of thinking about getting into HVAC if they're currently looking into it, or if they're in a different sector of the electrical industry, and that might be something that's taking their interest?
Like I said earlier, really need to get on board with a company that works for like a control panel company or something like that. I think that's probably your best route into it. So you get an understanding, and you start seeing plant rooms, you start seeing the kit, and then like when it starts getting livened up, you start to understand how the pipe work works. I mean, basically, a pipe works the ring main. You know, it's as simple as you know, you got a flow and you got a return.
Yeah.
You've got loads at the end of it. You know, your radiator's like a socket at the end of the day. You've got a live and neutral there, haven't you? You've got a flow and return. There you go. It isn't rocket science, or you know. And once you establish which ones are which, and normally then by the time they finish, they're all lagged up. They've normally got the flow and return arrows on them, and then you'll get like your stripy symbols. They'll dictate on what type of pipe work it is, whether it be domestic cold water, domestic hot water, your flows and returns on your heating, and that sort of stuff. Yeah, once you get your head around it, like it's been in the environment. I think just going out and thinking, oh, I'm going to do this big plant room today, like, you know, I don't think that's the way to attack it, unless you've got some serious knowledge behind you and you've done a serious load of background breathing. Then until you actually are on the site, physically putting it in, putting the conduit in, putting the trunkings in, and adding the panel to the wall, you know, and doing all that sort of gear. I think moving on from that, I mean, you can go into, you can do designing courses. You know, I mean, a lot of these consultants have never picked up a screwdriver in their life, so well, you could go down that route. But I mean, you're talking like, you know, 5 years out your working life. You know, can you afford to do that? You know, if you can, well, happy la, you know.
But would you say it's a worthwhile sector to get into, though?
I enjoy it. Yeah, I enjoy it. If you want to have something that tasks you a bit more, you know. It's but I would say on the domestic side now, you know, with the way the technologies are going, I mean, I still don't really get why we wire lighting in 230 volt. Don't understand why we do it. It's all LED now, isn't it? You're doing a new build. Yeah. Why isn't the lighting done next to low voltage? You know.
Yeah. It's a question for our audience to maybe get involved with.
Well, yeah. Why aren't we doing it? It's traditional that we do it this way. You know, it's whether it be 3 plates at the light, or whether it be 3 plates at the switch light. You know, whichever way that they tend to do it, but it's because it's what we've always done. Yeah. Well, technology's moved now. We need to move with the technology. Why are we putting light fittings in that have got 230 coming into them?
This is the beauty about being in the age of information now. You've got social media, YouTube, all these places where people can get together and collect their opinions together, and hopefully aiming at the powers that be and make a dent.
Yeah, it's that was quite a thing, actually. I'm not really a social media buff, as it were. Like, you know, it sort of fell on me, as it were. I did the Twitter, but it was more of a case because I was working for myself. I mean, I was working for myself for probably about 10 years before I joined an association. I joined the ECA. And of course, you get lost. the information. You know, I didn't really go to wholesalers anyway, so even picking up the PE magazine, like, you know, that was a once in a blue moon thing, that was. So you lose the technologies, what's happening and all that. So I started on Twitter again, just basically just keep an eye on what was going on in the world. You know, that's how I got into social media. Then when I first joined the ECA, we had a flyer come through regarding SYYY and CY Flex. Like, you know, be careful when using it. Like, make sure you do your background on it, that it is satisfactory for what you're putting it in for. So I looked into it a bit, like, because being in control, used quite a bit of it. Went down a massive rabbit warren, and basically that's where 7.1 comes from. I was known with Basic, I was the dog with the bone. And I through every corner of the industry, I was a bit of a pain in the butt. I wanted to know more. You know, what is this generally to? What is Gen 2? Well, it meant nothing, basically. It could have been as good as the British standard. It could be better than the British standard. It could be a wet piece of string. It meant nothing. The insulation sizes, the sheathing size, you know, the thicknesses and all that, copper quality, you know, they could say it was generally made to this standard. And this is where the problem come in with it. And now, so that's basically how 7.1 come about. But I did that because I was in the ECA. I went to the meetings and I pushed it that direction, went to the branch meeting, pushed it that direction. I can make a change here, you know, and I did. And then, like, social media coming about, and then now having like the latest DPC on the new amendment coming out, you know, you can get involved in it. This year was the biggest amount of comments they'd ever had on the different regulations, but because we could push it across social media, we found out, you know, us down on the ground Sparks could actually do something about it. You know, we can have a voice in this. Whereas before, then, as I grew up, I never knew that we even had a voice. Nobody told us.
But so you should, really. I mean, people working, as you say, boots on the ground, they're the ones that are in and out of it, knowing it better than people who might be sitting, you know, comfortably in some respects. Because technologies change, housing changes, everything changes, and it takes a while for that to catch up back at the top. So to feed it from the bottom back to the top is important, I think.
Oh yeah. It's and how it's physically put together. Does it practically actually work? You know, it's when fitting this kit, you know, it's like when your Dali systems first come out and such like that. I mean, the plugs that originally went with them, and you're crossing over voltages and stuff like that, and comms and all that. The first ones, they really, you know, the reason wasn't up to much, like, but now they're a lot better. You know, I mean, a lot of these big commercial lighting systems, like, you know, they're wiring a 230 to the light fitting, and then it's you know, an Ethernet cable that controls it. You know, like I say, why aren't we doing that in domestic? You know, why do we even put 230 there? You know, it's there's a lot of heat dissipation lost. So you've got power losses and all that sort of stuff. You know, so you're changing from a DC system into an AC system and back into a DC system. And yeah, because an LED is just a DC light emitting diode at the end of the day. So it's, why would you keep changing it when it go DC to DC? You know, it's just a thought. Just a thought.
No, it's good. It's good to have people's opinions, and that's why we do this show, as I said. But I think that probably brings us to a conclusion of this episode. So really, I hope anyone out there watching has found this useful. And like I said before, we've got plenty of other videos in the Job Routes for Electricians mini-series. We've been speaking to rail electricians, commercial, domestic, industrial, tutors, just to give you an idea of all the various routes you can take. So whatever stage you are in your career, that there's other options. You know, we're speaking to people. I don't think we've done a video on it, but we have spoken to people who they've been in the job for so many years that their bodies they can't keep up with it. You know, they've been damaging their knees from kneeling on cold floors and rafters, and they're thinking, where do I go from here? I can't do the physical side, and they might not realise you could go into tutoring or wholesales or technical departments like we've got here at Scolmore. So we just hope that these videos are of use for you, and HVAC is one of those routes you can take. And I just want to thank you, Eddie, for coming on the show and speaking to our audience and giving them an insight into what they could expect. So
No problem.
It's been a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to do so.
Yeah.
Have to have me back for the other stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. A few things in the line.
Exactly. So hopefully we'll get Eddie back on the show, hopefully in person as well. So that'd be nice. So please, anyone out there watching, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification button below. There's loads more videos here at SGTV. Thank you for watching.